Before we begin, drop a comment below with your country and what time it is right now where you're watching. Whether it's sunrise in Nairobi, midnight in New York, afternoon in Canada, or evening in France, I want to know. Don't just sit back. Tell me where in the world you are. Now, let's dive into the story. The dust swirled around Marin's feet as her father's hand tightened on her shoulder, pushing her forward toward the Apache warrior who sat tall on his painted horse. She didn't cry. Crying had stopped working years ago, back when she'd realized her father looked at her the way men look at broken tools, something that had failed to serve its purpose. Her sister Violet stood behind their father, blonde and beautiful, her blue eyes wide with false concern. Marin knew better. Violet had whispered it to their father for months. She'll never marry. No man wants her. Trade her for something useful. And now, standing in the blazing New Mexico sun with her belongings in a torn flour sack, Marin understood that her father had finally agreed. The Apache warrior, tall and silent with long black hair and eyes like obsidian, looked down at her without expression. Her father spoke in broken Spanish mixed with hand signs, gesturing at Marin like she was livestock. She works hard. Strong back. Good hands. The warrior said nothing, just studied Marin's face. The crooked nose broken twice in childhood falls, the scar across her chin, the too wide mouth and small eyes that her father said made her look like a toad. The transaction took less than 5 minutes. Her father received 3 horses, 2 rifles, and a bundle of furs worth more than Marin had ever been worth to him in 18 years of life. He didn't look at her as he turned away, leading the horses back toward their homestead where Violet waited, already planning the wedding dress she'd make with the money saved from not feeding an ugly daughter. Marin watched him go, her heart turning to stone in her chest. The Apache warrior dismounted in one fluid motion and walked around her slowly, not touching, just observing. She held herself still, refusing to show fear even though her knees shook beneath her plain brown dress. When he finally spoke, his English was better than her father's Spanish. "What is your name?" His voice was deep, quiet, like distant thunder. "Marin," she whispered. "Marin Coulter." He nodded once. "I am Dakota. You will ride with me." He gestured to his horse. Marin had never ridden anything but a plow horse, and the painted stallion looked wild and dangerous. But what choice did she have? The desert stretched endlessly in all directions, and she'd die out here alone within a day. Dakota lifted her onto the horse with surprising gentleness, then swung up behind her. His arms came around her to hold the reins, and Marin stiffened at the closeness, at the warmth of another human being who didn't flinch away from her ugliness. They rode in silence as the sun began its descent, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that hurt to look at because they were so beautiful. And Marin had learned long ago that beautiful things weren't meant for her. She thought about Violet, who would sleep in their shared bed alone tonight, finally free of the sister whose face embarrassed her at church socials. She thought about her father, who'd probably celebrate tonight, relieved to have solved his problem. And she thought about this stranger, this Apache warrior who'd bought her like a mule, and wondered what kind of hell awaited her in his village. But as the miles passed and Dakota's arms remained steady around her, never harsh, never cruel, something strange stirred in Marin's chest. It felt almost like hope, though she didn't trust it. Hope was for pretty girls with futures. They stopped at a small creek as twilight fell. Dakota dismounted first, then helped Marin down with the same careful gentleness. He gestured to the water. "Drink. Wash if you want. We camp here tonight." Marin knelt by the creek, cupping the cold water in her hands, and caught her reflection in the surface. The same ugly face stared back at her, the face her father couldn't stand to look at, the face that had cost her everything. She splashed water on it roughly, as if she could wash away the features that had made her worthless. When she looked up, Dakota was watching her with an expression she couldn't read. "Your father is a fool," he said quietly. Marin blinked. "What?" "A man who cannot see value is blind. Your father is blind." He turned away to tend his horse, leaving Maren kneeling by the water with tears streaming down her ugly face for the first time in years. Because in all her life, no one had ever suggested that maybe, just maybe, her father was wrong. The night stretched out long and strange. Dakota built a small fire and offered her dried meat and something that tasted like berries mixed with fat. They ate in silence, the desert alive with sounds Maren had never heard before. Coyotes calling, wind through sage, the crack of cooling rocks. She sat across from this man who'd bored her, trying to understand what he wanted, what she'd be required to do. Her father had made it clear what men wanted from women, and the fact that she was too ugly for marriage didn't mean she was safe from other uses. But Dakota simply rolled out a blanket for her near the fire and took his own place on the opposite side, his rifle within reach. "Sleep," he said. "Tomorrow is a long ride." Maren lay down, her body tense, waiting for him to cross that space between them. But he never did. And as the stars wheeled overhead in patterns she'd never noticed before, Maren felt something shift inside her, the first crack in the stone wall she'd built around her heart. This Apache warrior, this stranger who was now her owner, had shown her more kindness in one day than her own father had in 18 years. 6 months before the trade, Maren stood in the kitchen of their small homestead, her hands deep in bread dough, while Violet sat by the window in their mother's old rocking chair, embroidering flowers on a pillowcase for her hope chest. Their father had ridden to town before dawn to sell corn, leaving the girls to their chores. The division of labor had always been clear. Maren did the work that required strength and left you dirty, while Violet did the delicate tasks that kept her hands soft and her complexion fair. "You're kneading too hard," Violet said without looking up from her stitching. "You'll make the bread tough, though I suppose it matches the baker." Maren's hands stilled in the dough. These small cruelties from Violet came daily, like rain, and Man had learned to let them wash over her without response. Fighting back only made things worse. Their father always took Violet's side, always believed Violet's tears over Maren's truth. So Maren stayed silent, shaped the dough into loaves, and tried to remember when things had been different between them. Once, when they were small, they'd been friends. But that was before Maren fell from the barn loft and broke her nose, before the scar from the broken jar, before Violet bloomed into beauty and Maren stayed plain as clay. The day turned hot, and Maren carried water from the well, scrubbed floors, hung laundry, and pulled weeds from the vegetable garden that kept them fed through winter. Violet helped for maybe an hour, then claimed a headache and retired to their room to nap in the cool darkness. Maren didn't mind the work. Work was honest. Work didn't care what you looked like. When your back was bent over a washtub or your hands were buried in soil, your face didn't matter. It was only when you had to face people, at church, in town, at the rare social gathering, that ugliness became a burden too heavy to carry. Maren had seen the way mothers pulled their sons away from her, as if plainness might be contagious. She'd heard the whispers that maybe the Coulter girl was simple-minded, because why else would God make her so unfortunate to look at? Her father never corrected them. Her father never defended her. And gradually, Maren understood that in his eyes, she was a mistake. A daughter who would never attract a husband, never bring the connection or dowry that might lift their family's fortunes. She was just another mouth to feed, and she ate more than delicate Violet, which seemed to offend their father most of all. That evening, when their father returned from town, he'd been drinking. Maren smelled the whiskey on him as he stumbled through the door, his face flushed with anger that had nothing to do with her, and everything to do with prices that kept dropping and debts that kept growing. But anger needs a target, and Maren had learned she was always within range. "Where's Violet?" he demanded. "Resting, Papa?" She had a headache. He grunted, looking around the clean kitchen, the fresh bread cooling on the counter, the stew simmering over the fire. All Maren's work. "At least you're good for something," he muttered. Then louder, "Violet, come down here." Violet appeared at the top of the stairs, looking fresh and beautiful in a clean dress, her golden hair brushed and shining. She floated down the stairs like something from a painting, and Maren saw her father's face soften the way it only ever softened for his pretty daughter. "There's a social next Saturday at the church," he announced. "Young Garrett Hayes will be there. His father owns 300 acres, and the boy's looking for a wife. Violet, you'll wear your blue dress. I want you looking your finest." Violet beamed. "Yes, Papa." Maren turned back to the stew, stirring it slowly, trying to make herself invisible. But her father's attention swung back to her like a vulture circling. "You'll stay home," he said. "No point wasting good cloth on a dress you'd ruin just by putting it on. Besides, people talk enough without you standing there reminding them of what the Coulter family produced." The words hit like physical blows, but Maren kept her face blank, her movement steady. She'd learned not to react, not to give him the satisfaction. Violet, however, couldn't resist adding her own venom. "It's really for the best, Maren. You understand, don't you? Some people are meant to be seen, and others are meant to, well, work behind the scenes." She said it sweetly, as if she were being kind, as if she were protecting Maren from embarrassment. And maybe she believed that. Maybe Violet had convinced herself that her cruelty was actually mercy. Their father nodded approvingly at Violet's words, and Maren saw the alliance between them clearly. The beautiful daughter and the bitter father, united in their certainty that Maren's plainness was not just unfortunate, but somehow deserved, a moral failing rather than a random distribution of features. That night, lying in bed while Violet slept peacefully beside her, Maren stared at the ceiling and let herself imagine a different life. A life where faces didn't matter. A life where strength and capability were valued more than delicate features. A life where she wasn't constantly apologizing for existing. But imagination is a luxury for people with hope, and Maren's hope had been dying slowly for years, starved by neglect and watered with contempt. She didn't know then that in 6 months, her father would solve his problem of her existence in the cruelest way possible. She didn't know that being traded to an Apache warrior would be both the worst and best thing that ever happened to her. She didn't know that the end of her old life was rushing toward her like a summer storm, inevitable and transforming. All she knew was that she was 18 years old, ugly, unwanted, and trapped in a life that had no room for her. And in the darkness, listening to Violet's soft breathing and her father's snoring from the next room, Maren made a decision. If she couldn't be loved, she would, at least, be useful. If she couldn't be wanted, she would at least be necessary. It was the only value left to her. The Apache village appeared suddenly over a rise, and Maren's breath caught in her throat. It wasn't at all what she'd expected. Instead of the savage chaos her father's stories had prepared her for, she saw order. Wiki-ups arranged in careful circles, cook fires tended by women who looked up with curiosity but not hostility, children playing a game with sticks and a ball, men repairing weapons and tack with the same focused efficiency her father applied to farm tools. Dakota guided his horse through the village slowly, and Maren felt dozens of eyes on her. She sat straighter, refusing to shrink under their examination. If they found her ugly, well, she was used to that. But no one pointed or laughed. They simply looked, assessed, and returned to their tasks. An older woman approached as Dakota dismounted. She spoke rapidly in Apache, her dark eyes sharp as she looked Maren up and down. Dakota responded in the same language, his tone respectful but firm. The woman's weathered face creased into something that might have been approval, and she gestured for Maren to follow her. Dakota touched Maren's arm briefly. "This is Neol. She will teach you." Then he was gone, striding toward a larger wiki-up at the center of the village, leaving Maren with this stranger who spoke no English. Neol led Maren to a wiki-up on the edge of the village and gestured inside. It was small but carefully made, with buffalo hides covering a framework of curved poles. Blankets were folded neatly against one wall, and there was a fire pit in the center beneath a smoke hole. Neol pointed at the space, and then at Maren. And even without shared language, the meaning was clear. This was hers. Maren's eyes burned with unexpected tears. In her father's house, she'd shared everything with Violet. Space, blankets, even the air felt borrowed. But this wickiup, humble as it was, belonged to her alone. Niall noticed the tears and made a sound that might have been approval or sympathy. She handed Maren a deerskin dress, much more practical than the cotton one she wore, and mimed putting it on. Then she left, giving Maren privacy. Alone for the first time in 2 days, Maren changed into the soft deerskin and folded her old dress carefully, though she'd probably never wear it again. It smelled like her father's homestead, like flour and lye soap and disappointment. The deerskin smelled like smoke and sage and something wild she couldn't name. Like freedom, maybe. Like a different life entirely. The days fell into a rhythm that was both strange and strangely comforting. Niall appeared each morning and led Maren through the village, teaching her through gestures and repetition how to prepare hides, scraping away flesh and fat with stone tools until Maren's arms ached, how to gather roots and identify which plants were food and which were medicine, how to build a fire that burned hot with a little smoke, how to move through the desert landscape, reading signs Maren had never noticed before, animal tracks, water sources, dangerous ground. The work was harder than anything she'd done on her father's farm, but Niall never looked at her with contempt. When Maren made mistakes, Niall simply corrected her and moved on. When Maren succeeded, Niall nodded approval. There was no comparison to a prettier, better sister. There was just the work, and whether you could do it. Maren found herself desperate to learn, desperate to prove her worth in this new place where worth seemed to be measured differently than it had been in her old life. And slowly, something tight in her chest began to loosen, like a fist unclenching after years of holding on too hard. Dakota appeared and disappeared from village life like a shadow. Maren would see him training younger warriors, or talking with the elders, or leaving at dawn with hunting parties. He never approached her directly, never demanded anything, and Maren didn't know what to make of it. What did he want from her? Why had he traded valuable horses and rifles for a white girl no one else wanted? The questions circled in her mind like buzzards, but she had no way to ask them. Her Apache was limited to a handful of words, and Dakota seemed content to keep his distance. Then, 3 weeks after her arrival, Niall led Maren to the cooking fires where the women gathered in the evenings. A young woman about Maren's age smiled at her and patted the ground beside her. Her name was Tyann, and unlike Niall, she spoke some English learned from traders. "You work hard," Tyann said approvingly. "Niall says you learn fast, not like some white women who cry and refuse." Maren felt warmth spread through her chest at the praise. "I want to be useful," she said quietly. Tyann laughed. "You are useful. Dakota chose well." Maren's heart hammered. Why did he choose me? I don't understand. My father, he was glad to be rid of me. Tyann's face grew serious. Dakota's wife died 2 winters ago, giving birth. The baby died too. He was... She searched for the English word. Empty inside after. The elders worried. Said he needed to return to living. When your father offered trade, Dakota saw something. What could he possibly see? Maren's voice broke. I'm not beautiful. I'm not what men want. Tyann reached out and touched Maren's scarred chin, not with pity, but with something like recognition. Beauty fades. Storms come. Children get sick. Drought kills crops. Dakota lost everything beautiful. He learned beauty is not enough. He saw you work in your father's garden while he negotiated. Saw your strong back, your quiet way. Saw you did not complain. He said you had a survivor's face. That is better than a pretty face. The words hit Maren like a lightning strike. A survivor's face. Not ugly, not unfortunate. A survivor. Something worth having. She looked across the fire and found Dakota watching, her from where he sat with the other men. And for the first time, she didn't look away in shame. The storm hit on a night when most of the warriors were away hunting, and Maren woke to chaos. Wind screamed through the village like something alive and hungry, ripping at the wickiups with violence that terrified her. Rain came sideways, turning the ground to mud within minutes. Maren stumbled out of her shelter to find Niall shouting orders, organizing the women to secure what could be saved. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the village in flashes of white light that made everything look unreal, like a nightmare. A child screamed nearby, and Maren ran toward the sound without thinking. A small boy, maybe 5 years old, stood alone by a collapsed wickiup, crying for his mother who was nowhere to be seen. Maren scooped him up and ran toward the largest central wickiup where people were gathering, her feet sliding in the mud, the wind trying to knock her down. The boy clung to her neck with desperate strength, and Maren held him tighter, her body curving around him protectively. She'd never held a child before. Her father had never let her near Violet's friends' babies, as if ugliness might transfer through touch. But this child didn't care what she looked like. He just needed someone to keep him safe, and Maren would die before she let him go. Inside the central wickiup, organized chaos reigned. Women worked together securing supplies, calming frightened children, tending a fire that kept trying to die. Niall spotted Maren and the boy, nodded approvingly, and gestured for her to help with the children. There were 8 of them, ranging from toddlers to a girl of about 12, all scared and crying for parents who were out securing livestock or reinforcing shelters. Maren had no experience with children, but she had experience with fear, and she knew that fear needed distraction. She began telling them a story her mother had told her before she died, back when Maren was small, and still believed stories could protect you from the dark. Her Apache was terrible, so she mixed in English and gestures, acting out the tale of a clever rabbit who outsmarted a bear. The children watched her with wide eyes, and slowly their crying subsided. The 12-year-old girl, whose name was Kimamela, began translating the parts the younger ones didn't understand, and together, Maren and Kimamela wove a story that made the children forget the storm raging outside. When Maren ran out of stories, she taught them a hand-clapping game from her own childhood, and soon the wickiup rang with laughter instead of tears. The storm raged for 3 hours. When it finally passed, the village emerged to survey the damage. 2 wickiups destroyed completely, several others damaged, and crops flattened in the fields. But no one was seriously hurt, and the livestock had been secured. The hunters returned at dawn, soaked and exhausted, and Maren watched as families reunited with relief and joy. Dakota appeared from the darkness, mud-streaked and weary, his eyes immediately searching the gathered people. When his gaze found Maren standing with the children, something in his face shifted. He approached slowly, and the boy Maren had rescued, his nephew, she learned later, ran to him, chattering in rapid Apache about the storm and the white woman who saved him and told funny stories. Dakota listened, his eyes never leaving Maren's face, and when the boy finished, Dakota spoke to her directly for the first time in weeks. "You kept the children safe." It wasn't a question, but Maren nodded anyway. "They were scared. I just distracted them." "You did more than that." His voice was low, intense. "You ran into the storm to save my sister's son. You could have stayed in your shelter, been safe." Maren met his eyes, those dark eyes that had watched her with such inscrutability since the day he'd traded for her. He needed help. That's what you do. You help. Something passed between them in that moment, some understanding that didn't require words. Dakota reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and touched her scarred chin with surprising gentleness. "Your father was a fool," he repeated, the words he'd said that first night by the creek. But this time, they landed differently. This time, Maren almost believed them. The village spent the next week rebuilding, and Maren worked alongside everyone else, her hands blistering as she helped recover wickiups and salvage what could be saved from the damaged crops. The women accepted her fully now, including her in their conversations, even though she understood maybe half of what they said. The children followed her around like ducklings, and Maren found herself smiling more than she had in years. At night, exhausted and aching, she'd return to her wickiup to find small gifts left by the entrance: a piece of dried meat, a finely made basket, a blanket softer than the one she had. The village was thanking her, and Maren didn't know how to hold all the unfamiliar feelings that created. She'd spent 18 years being unwanted, and now these people, these supposed savages her father had warned her about, were showing her kindness she'd never known from her own family. One evening, as the sun painted the desert in shades of gold and crimson, Dakota appeared at her wickiup. "Walk with me," he said quietly. It wasn't a command, but an invitation, and Maren found herself rising to follow him. They walked in silence to the edge of the village where the land dropped away into a canyon painted in sunset colors. "I need to explain," Dakota said finally. "Why I traded for you. What I want." Maren's heart hammered. Here it was then. The truth. The price she'd have to pay. "When my wife died," Dakota continued, his voice rough with old pain, "I wanted to die too. For a long time, I did everything I could to make that happen. Took every dangerous hunting trip. Volunteered for every raid. The elders saw what I was doing and forbade it. Said I was needed here, that I couldn't throw my life away. So I lived, but I wasn't living. Just existing." He turned to look at her, and in the fading light, his face was open in a way she'd never seen. "Then I saw you in your father's yard, working while he negotiated. Saw how hard you worked, how your sister watched you with contempt, how your father wouldn't look at you, and I saw myself. Someone made to feel worthless, someone just existing." Maren couldn't breathe. "I thought maybe we could help each other learn to live again. Not as husband and wife, not unless you wanted that someday. Just as two people who understand what it means to be discarded. I should have explained before, should have asked. I'm sorry." And there, standing in the desert sunset with this man who'd seen her as worth saving, Maren felt the last of the stone around her heart crack open. For the first time in her life, someone saw her. Really saw her. Not her face, not her usefulness, but her. "Thank you," she whispered, "for seeing me." Dakota nodded solemnly. "You are not hard to see, Maren Coulter. You never were. Your father was just blind." The raiders came at dawn when the mist still clung to the ground, and most of the village was just waking. Maren heard the gunshots first, sharp cracks that shattered the peaceful morning, followed by screams and the thunder of horses. She stumbled from her wickiup to see chaos, white men on horseback tearing through the village, firing weapons, setting wickiups ablaze. Her mind went blank with terror for just a moment before training kicked in. The children. Where were the children? She ran towards the central wickiup where families gathered, her heart in her throat, and nearly collided with Kimimela, who was herding 3 small ones toward the rocks behind the village. "Take them to the caves," Kimimela shouted in broken English. "I get more." Without thinking, Maren grabbed the children and ran. She knew the caves Kimimela meant. She'd explored them with Neil weeks ago. They were hidden, defensible, the place women and children went when danger came. Behind her, the sounds of violence grew louder. Men shouting in English now, cruel voices demanding gold and captives. She recognized that tone. It was the same tone her father used when talking about Indians, the sound of people who decided someone else wasn't fully human. Maren got the first group of children to the caves and ran back for more, her chest burning, her legs shaking with exhaustion and fear. The village was an inferno now, smoke billowing thick and black, making it hard to see or breathe. She found 2 more children huddled behind a water barrel and scooped them up, one under each arm, ignoring their weight and her screaming muscles. A raider on horseback spotted her and wheeled toward her, his face twisted with excitement at the prospect of an easy target. Maren ran harder than she'd ever run, the children's terrified screams in her ears. She wouldn't make it. The horse was too fast, the caves too far. But then Dakota appeared from the smoke like a vengeful spirit, his knife flashing as he pulled the raider from his horse. The man's scream cut off abruptly, and Dakota was beside her, blood on his hands and face, his eyes wild. "Go!" he shouted. "Get them safe." Maren went, her mind fractured with horror and fear, clutching children who weren't hers, but felt like hers now. These small lives depending on her strength and speed. She made it to the caves and found them already crowded with women and children, Neol organizing defensive positions with the calm efficiency of someone who'd survived raids before. The battle lasted 2 hours, though it felt like days. Maren stayed at the mouth of the cave with the other women, ready to fight with rocks and knives if the raiders found them. She held a child in one arm and a sharp stone in the other hand, and she knew with absolute certainty that she would kill to protect these people who'd given her a home. The realization didn't frighten her. It clarified everything. She understood now what Dakota had meant about becoming a predator to survive. Sometimes the world gave you no choice. When silence finally fell over the village, it was worse than the noise had been. The women waited, tense and terrified, until Dakota appeared at the cave entrance, weary and blood-splattered, but alive. "It's over," he said quietly. "They're gone." The village emerged to devastation. Half the Wickiups burned to ash. 4 warriors dead, including an elder Maren had liked. 7 wounded. The raiders had fled when the Apache warriors' resistance proved fiercer than expected, but they'd taken horses, supplies, and one young woman who'd been caught in the open. The loss hung over the village like a shroud, and Maren helped tend the wounded with hands that shook, cleaning wounds and holding water to cracked lips, doing what needed doing because falling apart wasn't an option. That night, the village held a council. Maren sat outside the circle, not quite belonging, but close enough to hear. The men debated pursuit, revenge, relocation. The raiders had been white outlaws, not soldiers, which meant no one would come looking for justice on the Apache's behalf. They could strike back, but that would bring more violence. They could move, but this was their land, their home. The arguments went in circles, tempered by grief and rage and exhaustion. Finally, Dakota stood. "I will go after them," he announced, "not for revenge, to get Amma back." Amma was the captured girl, barely 16, promised to one of the young warriors. Her mother had been wailing for hours, her grief raw and terrible. "I will go alone," Dakota continued. "If I don't return, the village doesn't suffer for my choice." The elders protested, but Dakota was firm. He would leave at dawn, track the raiders, and bring Amma home or die trying. The meeting dissolved, and Maren found herself following Dakota to his wickiup, her heart pounding with an emotion she couldn't name. He turned when he heard her approach, his face weary in the firelight. "Maren, you should rest. Today was—" "Take me with you," she interrupted. "What?" "Take me with you, to get Amma back. You'll need help, and I can—" "No." His voice was flat, final. "It's too dangerous. These men are killers. I know. I saw." She stepped closer, her hands clenched into fists. "I can help. I'm white. They might not see me as a threat. I can get close, distract them, something. Please. That girl, she was kind to me. I can't just let her—" "No," Dakota repeated, but his voice had softened. "I can't risk you." "Why not? I'm nothing. Just an ugly girl nobody wanted." The words came out bitter, all the old poison rising up. Dakota closed the distance between them in 2 strides and gripped her shoulders, his eyes blazing. "Stop! Stop saying that. You are not nothing. You are brave and strong and worth 10 of those raiders, worth 100 of your father. And I—" He stopped abruptly, something raw and vulnerable flashing across his face before he could hide it. The air between them crackled with unspoken words, and Maren's breath caught. "You what?" she whispered. But Dakota released her, stepping back, his walls going up again. "Get some rest, Maren. That's an order." He disappeared into his wickiup. leaving her standing alone in the darkness, her heart racing, her mind spinning with the implications of what he'd almost said. Maren didn't sleep that night. She lay in her wickiup watching the smoke hole lighten from black to grey to pale blue as dawn approached, and she made a decision. Dakota thought he was protecting her by leaving her behind, but he was wrong. She knew how white outlaws thought, how they talked, what they wanted. She'd grown up around men like them, men who took what they wanted and destroyed what they couldn't use. Men like her father. And she knew something else too. She was falling in love with Dakota. Maybe had been since that first night by the creek when he'd called her father a fool. Maybe since the storm when he'd looked at her like she mattered. Maybe since right now, when he'd called her brave and strong and worth something. She didn't know when it had happened, only that it had, and love made you do stupid, reckless things, like following a warrior into danger to save a girl you barely knew because you couldn't bear the thought of him facing those men alone. So when the village was still dark and quiet, Maren slipped from her wickiup, gathered supplies, and set out on foot following the tracks heading west. She had maybe an hour before Dakota discovered she was gone, maybe 2 hours before he caught up with her. But she had a head start, and she had determination, and sometimes that was enough. The desert stretched before her, vast and dangerous and full of possibility, and Maren walked into it without looking back. The sun rose fierce and unforgiving, turning the desert into a furnace. Maren's feet were already blistering in her borrowed moccasins, and sweat soaked through her deerskin dress. But she pushed forward, following the raiders' trail through the scrub. She had grabbed supplies in the dark, water skin, dried meat, a knife, but she hadn't thought to take a hat, and now her head pounded with every step. Stupid. She was being so stupid. But turning back felt impossible. Emma was out there, terrified and alone with men who saw her as property. And Dakota was hunting them, ready to die if that's what it took. Maren couldn't let either of them face that alone. She heard the horse before she saw it, the rhythmic thunder of hooves on hard ground, and her heart sank. He'd caught up faster than she'd hoped. She turned to face Dakota as he reined in beside her, and the fury on his face should have terrified her. "What are you doing?" His voice was deadly quiet, which was somehow worse than shouting. "Helping," Maren said, lifting her chin. "You can't do this alone. I need you safe. I need you back in the village where you belong." Now he was shouting, his control cracking. "Do you have any idea what those men would do if they caught you?" "The same thing they're doing to Amma right now," Maren shouted back, all her fear and frustration boiling over. "I know exactly what they'd do, because I've heard men like them talk my whole life. I've seen how they look at women they think are beneath them. And maybe I can help, because I understand them in a way you can't." "By getting yourself killed?" Dakota swung down from his horse, closing the distance between them, his face a mask of barely controlled emotion. "By making me watch while they—" He stopped, breathing hard, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. "I can't lose you," he said finally, the words torn from somewhere deep. "I won't survive losing you." The confession hung in the air between them, raw and honest and terrifying. Maren's eyes burned with tears. "Then don't leave me behind. Let me come with you. Let me help. Please, Dakota. I need to do this. For Emma. For the village. For—" She couldn't finish. "For you. Because I love you, and I'm done being the person who stays behind and waits to be discarded." But the words stuck in her throat, too big and too scary to say out loud. Dakota looked at her for a long moment, something shifting in his dark eyes. Then he let out a long breath and nodded once. "You ride with me. You do exactly what I say. And if things go wrong, you run. Agreed?" "Agreed," Maren lied, knowing she'd never run if it meant leaving him behind. They rode double on Dakota's horse, conserving the animal's strength for when they'd need speed. The trail led west toward a series of canyons where outlaws often hid, places with water and defensive positions. Dakota explained his plan as they rode. They'd scout first, find Amma's location, wait until dark, and extract her, quietly if possible. If violence came, it would be fast and decisive. These men, Dakota said, his voice hard. They're not like the warriors who raid for honor or to prove themselves. They're empty inside, broken. They hurt people because it makes them feel powerful and nothing will change them. Maren thought of her father, of the way he'd looked at her with such contempt, and wondered if all cruelty came from the same hollow place. Have you killed men before? She asked quietly. Yes. No hesitation, no guilt, just truth. Does it bother you? Only when I don't have a good reason. He glanced back at her. Today, I have the best reason. They took someone under my protection. That's reason enough. They found the raiders' camp as the sun began to set, nestled in a canyon with walls that glowed red in the fading light. 5 men, rough and dirty, passing a bottle around a fire. And there, tied to a tree at the edge of camp, was Amma. Even from a distance, Maren could see the girl was hurt, her dress torn, her face swollen. Rage, white-hot and purifying, flooded through Maren's body. These men, these monsters, they deserved everything Dakota was about to do to them. We wait for full dark, Dakota whispered. They'd left the horse a mile back and crawled to a position overlooking the camp. When they're drunk or asleep, I'll go in. You stay here. If something goes wrong, if I don't come back in 1 hour, you ride to the village and bring warriors. Understand? Yes, Maren said. Another lie, because she was already forming her own plan. She watched the camp as the men got drunker, their laughter getting louder and crueler. One of them approached Amma, and Maren had to look away, her stomach churning with helpless fury. She couldn't wait an hour, couldn't let that girl suffer another minute if there was something, anything, she could do. Dakota, she whispered. What if I went down there? What? No, absolutely not. Listen, I'm white. They see me, they don't see a threat. They see a woman alone, lost. I could distract them while you position yourself for better access to Amma. Get them away from her. Then when you move, they're confused, off balance. It was insane, reckless. Dakota's face said as much, but it was also smart, and they both knew it. After a long, agonizing moment, Dakota nodded. You approach from the south. Act confused, scared. Get them to gather around you, away from Amma. Give me 5 minutes to circle around. At my signal, a bird call, 3 short whistles, you drop flat. Don't hesitate, don't think. Just drop. Understand? I understand. Maren. He gripped her arm, his eyes intense in the gathering darkness. If this works, when this is over, we need to talk. Really talk. Her heart hammered. About what? About everything I should have said weeks ago. Then he was gone, melting into the shadows like smoke, leaving Maren alone with her pounding heart and a plan that could get them both killed. She gave him his 5 minutes, counting each second, and then she stood up and walked down into the canyon toward the firelight and the dangerous men waiting there. The men spotted her almost immediately, their rough conversation cutting off as they reached for weapons. Maren made herself stumble, grabbing at rocks for support, making her exhaustion and fear real. Please, she called out in English, her voice breaking perfectly. Please help me. I'm lost. I've been walking for days. My wagon broke down and my husband went for help and never came back, and I've been alone and… She let herself collapse near the fire, not too close, letting them come to her. And they did, like wolves to wounded prey, gathering around her with speculation in their eyes. Well, well, one of them said, a big man with a scarred face and missing teeth. What do we have here? You really alone, girl? Please, Maren whispered. I just need water, food. I'll work for it. I'll clean. I'll cook. Anything. Please. They laughed, and the sound made her skin crawl, but they'd moved away from Amma. All of them focused on Maren now, and that was what mattered. She saw movement in the shadows behind them. Dakota, positioning himself. Just a little longer. Keep them distracted. You're a ugly little thing, ain't you? Another man said, squatting down to peer at her face. But I suppose in the dark that don't matter much. The others laughed harder, and Maren let tears stream down her face, playing the helpless woman they expected. Inside, though, she was cold as ice, her hand inching toward the knife hidden in her belt. 3 short whistles cut through the night. Maren threw herself flat as chaos exploded. Dakota moved like lightning-made flesh, his knife finding the first man's throat before anyone understood what was happening. The raider dropped without a sound, blood spreading dark across the ground. The other men scrambled for weapons, shouting in confusion, and Maren rolled toward Emma while their attention was on Dakota. She reached the girl and cut her bonds with shaking hands, pulling her behind a boulder as gunshots cracked through the canyon. "Stay down," Maren hissed in broken Apache, covering Emma's body with her own as bullets whined overhead. "Dakota will get us out." She hoped. God, she hoped. She risked a glance around the boulder and saw Dakota fighting with a ferocity that was both beautiful and terrifying. He'd killed 2 men now, but 3 remained, and they'd spread out trying to flank him. One of them spotted Maren and Amma behind the boulder and grinned, changing direction. "Got the girls cornered, boys," he shouted, raising his rifle. Maren pushed Amma flat and threw her knife in one desperate motion, all the strength built from years of farm work behind it. The blade wasn't balanced for throwing, and her aim was terrible, but luck or divine intervention guided it into the man's shoulder. He screamed and dropped his rifle, clutching at the protruding blade. It wasn't a killing blow, but it gave Dakota the opening he needed. The warrior crossed the distance in 3 strides and finished what Maren had started. The man went down hard, and now there were 2 raiders left. They'd taken cover behind supply crates, firing wildly at Dakota, who ducked behind the fire pit. The standoff couldn't last. Someone would get lucky eventually, and then they'd all die. Maren's mind raced. She had no weapons left, no way to help directly, but she had something else. She had knowledge of how these men thought. "They're just a squaw and an ugly white girl," she screamed suddenly, her voice high and terrified, playing into every assumption these men had ever made. "For God's sake, kill the Indian and take the horses. Leave us. We're not worth dying for." She heard Dakota's sharp intake of breath from across the camp, understanding instantly what she was doing. The psychology was simple. Make herself and Amma seem worthless, not worth the fight. Give the raiders an excuse to retreat without losing face. For a moment, it hung in the balance. Then one of the remaining raiders shouted, "She's right. This ain't worth it. There's only 2 of them and 1 of him. Let's go." They ran for their horses, and Dakota let them go, not pursuing, just keeping his body between them and the women until the sound of hooves faded into the distance. Then silence fell, broken only by heavy breathing and the crackle of the dying fire. Maren stood on shaking legs, helping Amma up. The girl was sobbing now, the shock wearing off, and Maren held her close, murmuring soothing nonsense while her own hands trembled with reaction. 4 men dead. She'd helped kill one of them. The knowledge sat in her stomach like a stone, but she couldn't regret it. Wouldn't regret it. Dakota approached slowly, blood splattered and exhausted, his eyes searching Maren's face. "Are you hurt?" "No. You." "I'll live." He looked at Amma, his expression softening. "You're safe now. I'm taking you home." The girl nodded, still crying, and Dakota wrapped his cloak around her shoulders before turning back to Maren. "What you did? Calling yourself ugly, worthless?" His voice was rough with emotion. "That was smart. Cruel to yourself, but smart." "It's what they expected to hear," Maren said quietly. "Men like that, they need to believe some people don't matter. It makes them feel powerful. I just gave them permission to believe we didn't matter enough to die for." Dakota's hand came up to cup her scarred cheek, his thumb brushing away dirt and tears. "You matter," he said fiercely. "To me, to the village, to everyone whose life you've touched. And someday, I'll make you believe that." Her breath caught. "Dakota, not now. First we get Emma home. Then we talk, I promise." He retrieved his horse and lifted Emma onto its back with gentle care before helping Maren up behind her. They rode through the night, putting distance between themselves and the death-soaked canyon, and Maren held Emma close, feeling the girl's tears soak into her dress. This was what mattered, not faces or beauty or what men like her father valued. This, protecting people, fighting for them, refusing to let cruelty win. This was what it meant to be worth something. Dawn found them approaching the village, and the lookout spotted them before they crested the ridge. By the time they rode in, half the village had gathered, Emma's mother running forward with a cry of joy and relief. They pulled the girl down from the horse, surrounding her with love and safety, and Maren slipped away, suddenly exhausted beyond measure. She made it to her wickiup and collapsed onto her blankets, too tired to even remove her moccasins. Sleep pulled at her like a riptide, and she let it take her, knowing she was safe here, knowing she was home. When she woke, the sun was high overhead and someone was sitting beside her. Maren blinked in confusion, focusing slowly on Niol's weathered face. The older woman held a cup of something hot and pressed it into Maren's hands. "Drink," she commanded. Maren obeyed, tasting herbs and honey, feeling warmth spread through her body. "How long did I sleep?" "One day. You needed it." Niol's eyes were sharp, knowing. "The village talks of nothing but your bravery. How you followed Dakota. How you distracted the raiders. How you threw your knife to save Amma. You are becoming legend." Maren almost laughed. "I'm not brave. I was terrified the whole time." "Bravery is being terrified and acting anyway." Niol patted her hand. "You are one of us now, Maren. Not white, not Apache. Something new, something needed." The words settled into Maren's chest like seeds in fertile soil. One of us. Needed. These people had given her what her own family never had, a place to belong. Worth that wasn't measured in prettiness or social standing, but in courage and heart. She was still ugly. That hadn't changed. But somehow, in this village, under this vast desert sky, it didn't matter anymore. "Dakota waits for you," Niol said with a sly smile. "He has been sitting outside your wickiup like a dog at a door. Very improper, very obvious. The whole village knows." Heat flooded Maren's face. "Knows what?" "That he loves you, foolish girl. That he has loved you since he traded for you. That he was just waiting for you to see yourself the way he sees you." Niol stood, smoothing her dress. "Go to him. Talk. Stop wasting time. Life is too short for pride or fear." She left, and Maren sat there clutching her cup, her heart hammering. Dakota loved her. Dakota, who was strong and brave and could have any woman, loved her. The ugly daughter, the one traded away like livestock. How? Why? But she knew why. Because he'd seen past her face to everything underneath. Because he'd valued the things that mattered. Strength, loyalty, courage, heart. Because somewhere in his grief and her shame, they'd found each other. Two broken people learning to be whole again. Maren stood, smoothed her dress with shaking hands, and stepped outside. Dakota sat against a nearby tree, whittling something from a piece of wood, but his eyes came up immediately when he heard her. The look in them made her knees weak. "Walk with me?" he asked quietly. "Yes," Maren said. "Let's walk." And as they headed toward the canyon rim where they'd talked before, where the desert stretched forever and the sky was too big to hold, Maren felt something she'd never expected to feel in this life. Hope. Real hope. The kind that comes from being seen and choosing to see yourself through kinder eyes. They walked in silence to the canyon's edge, where the wind carried the scent of sage and sun-baked earth. Maren's heart hammered so hard she was sure Dakota could hear it, but she kept her face calm, waiting for him to speak first. He seemed to be gathering courage, this warrior who'd faced death without flinching, now nervous about words. Finally, he stopped at the rim where the land dropped away into layers of red and gold stone. and turned to face her. When my wife died, he began, his voice low and rough. I died too. Not my body, but everything that mattered. She was beautiful. Everyone said so. Long black hair that shone like a raven's wing, soft hands that never knew hard work, a laugh like water over stones. I loved her the way young men love, desperately, blindly, thinking beauty and passion were enough. He picked up a stone and turned it over in his hands, not looking at Maren. But we were children playing at marriage. She didn't want to be a warrior's wife, wanted pretty things, easy life, resented the work, the danger. We fought, made each other miserable. When she died giving birth, my grief was mixed with guilt because part of me felt relieved. And that made me a monster. You're not a monster, Maren whispered. You're human. After she died, I learned something. Dakota continued. Beauty fades, passion cools, but partnership, true partnership between people who see each other clearly and choose each other anyway, that lasts. That matters. He finally looked at her, and his eyes were full of things that made her breath catch. When I saw you at your father's farm, I saw someone like me, someone strong who'd been told they were weak, someone valuable who'd been treated as worthless, someone surviving in a place that didn't want them, and I thought, maybe we could survive together. Maybe we could become something neither of us could be alone. Maren's eyes burned with tears. You saw all that from watching me work in a garden? A ghost of a smile touched his lips. I saw how your father didn't look at you, how your sister looked at you with contempt, how you kept your head down and worked without complaint. I saw survival, dignity, strength that hadn't been broken by cruelty. That's rarer than beauty, Maren. That's worth trading everything I had. But you didn't know me, didn't know if I was cruel or stupid or... I knew enough. His voice was firm. I knew you were treated like you had no value and still showed up every day. That tells me everything about character. He moved closer, his hands coming up to frame her face, his thumbs gentle on her scarred skin. These scars, this face you think is ugly. I see a woman who kept getting up after falling. I see resilience. I see someone worth knowing. The tears came now, hot and fast. All the years of being told she was worthless cracking open. I'm not who you think I am, she choked out. I'm just... You ran into a storm to save a child. You kept children calm when they were terrified. You followed me into danger to help rescue Amma. You threw yourself between a gun and a girl you barely knew. You called yourself ugly and worthless to save our lives. His voice was fierce now, his eyes blazing. That's who you are, Maren. Not your face, not what your father said. This, your actions, your heart. That's who I see, and that's who I love. The word love hung in the air between them, bigger than the canyon, more vast than the desert. Maren couldn't breathe, couldn't think. You don't mean that. I do. I love you. I think I loved you from the moment you didn't flinch when I rode toward you that first day, when you held yourself with dignity even though your father had just sold you, when you survived instead of breaking. I love your strength, your quiet courage, the way you learned our language and customs without complaint, the way you love our children like they're yours, the way you see me, not as a warrior or a hunter, but as a man, a person, the way no one has seen me since my wife died. Maren's hands came up to grip his wrists, anchoring herself to him because the world was spinning and nothing made sense except this moment. I love you too, she whispered. I didn't want to. Thought it was stupid to love someone who'd bought me. But I do. I love how gentle you are with people who need it, and how fierce you are with people who deserve it. I love that you see worth in broken things, that you gave me a home when I had none, that you looked at me and saw someone worth saving. You saved yourself, Dakota said. I just gave you space to do it. Then he kissed her, soft and careful, asking permission with every movement. Maren kissed him back, her first kiss at 18 years old, and it was nothing like she'd imagined. It wasn't desperate or demanding, it was gentle, reverent, like she was something precious, like she mattered. When they pulled apart, Dakota rested his forehead against hers, his breath warm on her skin. "Marry me," he said, "not because I traded for you or because you owe me anything. Marry me because we chose each other, because we're stronger together than apart, because I want to wake up beside you every day and build a life where we both belong." Marin's heart felt too big for her chest. "Yes," she breathed. "Yes, I'll marry you. Not because you saved me, but because you saw me, really saw me. That's worth everything." They stood there on the canyon's edge as the sun painted the sky in colors that hurt with their beauty. Two people who'd been discarded, learning to build something new from their broken pieces. And for the first time in her life, Marin understood that beauty wasn't about the shape of your face or the color of your eyes. It was about this: choosing love when the world had taught you not to trust it, finding home in another person's seeing of you, building something true and strong from honesty and courage and the willingness to be vulnerable. "When?" Marin asked. "Soon. Tomorrow if you want. Or we can wait. Have a proper ceremony." "Tomorrow," Marin interrupted. "I've waited 18 years to belong somewhere. I don't want to wait anymore." Dakota smiled, really smiled, and Marin realized she'd never seen him look this happy. "Tomorrow then. We'll do it the Apache way. You'll move into my wickiup. We'll speak our promises in front of the elders, and you'll be my wife, my partner, my equal in everything." "Your equal?" The concept was foreign. Her father had never treated her mother as an equal, had never treated Marin as anything but a burden. "Is that how it works here?" "That's how it works between us," Dakota said firmly. "I don't want a servant or a pretty ornament. I want a partner, someone who will tell me when I'm wrong, who will stand beside me in danger, who will build our life with me. That's you, Marin. That's who you've always been." They walked back to the village hand in hand, and Marin felt different, not less ugly. Her face was still the same, her scars still there, but she stood taller, held her head higher, because she'd finally learned the truth that Dakota had known from the beginning. Worth isn't given by people who don't understand it. Worth is inherent. It exists whether anyone acknowledges it or not, and she had worth. She always had. Her father's blindness didn't change that. When they reached the village, Neil took one look at their joined hands and began ululating, the joyful cry that announced good news. Within minutes, the whole village knew. Women gathered around Marin, chattering excitedly, already planning the ceremony. Children danced around Dakota, singing songs about warriors and their brides. The elders nodded approvingly, as if they'd known this was coming all along. And Marin, standing in the center of this celebration, surrounded by people who'd chosen to love her, finally let herself believe it. She was home. She was loved. She was exactly where she was supposed to be. That night, lying in her wickiup for the last time, Marin thought about her father and Violet back in their homestead. Thought about them sleeping in beds she'd made, eating food she'd grown, living in a house she'd maintained. Did they ever think about her? Did they wonder if she'd survived? Did they care? The answer was probably no, and surprisingly, that didn't hurt anymore, because she'd found something better than their approval. She'd found people who saw her value without needing to be convinced. She'd found a man who loved her not despite her scars, but because of everything those scars represented. Survival, strength, resilience. She'd found herself. Tomorrow she'd marry Dakota. Tomorrow she'd officially become part of this village, this life, this new story where ugly girls could be heroes and discarded daughters could become beloved wives. Tomorrow her real life would begin. But tonight, Marin simply lay beneath the stars, visible through her smoke hole, and smiled. For the first time in 18 years, she was happy. Truly, completely, undeniably happy. And that was worth more than all the beauty in the world. The wedding ceremony was simple and beautiful, conducted at dawn when the desert was cool and painted in shades of pink and gold. Marin wore a doe-skin dress decorated with intricate beadwork that the village women had stayed up all night creating, each bead a tiny declaration that she belonged. Dakota stood beside her in his finest clothes, his hand steady as he spoke the promises in Apache that Tyan quietly translated. I choose you as my partner in all things. I will hunt for you, protect you, honor you. I will see you always truly as you are. My heart is yours until I die. Then it was Marin's turn, her voice shaking but clear as she spoke in halting Apache the words Neol had taught her. I choose you as my partner in all things. I will work beside you, stand with you, honor you. I will see you always truly as you are. My heart is yours until I die. The elders blessed them, smoke from sacred herbs rising between them, and just like that, she was married. She was Dakota's wife. She was finally, completely home. The celebration lasted all day. Food, dancing, gifts from village members who'd come to love this strange white woman who'd proven herself brave. But as evening fell, a lookout rode in hard, his face grim. Riders coming, white men, many of them. The joy drained from the village instantly, replaced by tension and fear. Dakota's hand found Marin's, squeezing once before he went to speak with the elders. Marin followed, her heart pounding. How many? Dakota asked. 10, maybe 12. Armed. Moving fast. The lookout hesitated. They carry a white flag. Say they want to talk, not fight. Suspicion rippled through the gathered Apache. White men's truces were notoriously unreliable, but refusing to meet might bring violence, and the village was still recovering from the last raid. I'll go, Dakota said. Take 5 warriors, meet them on neutral ground. Find out what they want. I'm coming with you, Marin said immediately. Marin, if they're white men, I might understand things you don't. Might catch lies you'd miss. Please. We're partners. We face things together. You said so yourself. Dakota looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. Together. But you stay behind me. Agreed? Agreed. They rode out with 5 warriors, meeting the white men a mile from the village where a natural clearing provided space for discussion. As they approached, Marin's heart nearly stopped, because the man at the front of the group, older and grayer than she remembered, but unmistakable, was her father. He saw her at the same moment, his eyes widening in shock. Marin? His voice cracked. You're alive? She said nothing, her face a mask, though inside her emotions churned. What was he doing here? Why had he come? We need to talk, her father said, glancing nervously at Dakota and the armed warriors. Alone, father to daughter. No, Dakota said flatly. Whatever you say to her, you say in front of me. I'm her husband now. Her father's face went purple. Her what? You married her? She's white. She's beautiful, Dakota interrupted, his voice dangerous. Strong, brave, everything you were too blind to see. Now say what you came to say. Her father dismounted, his hands shaking, and Marin noticed things she hadn't before. How much older he looked. How worn. How his clothes hung loose on a frame that had lost weight. Things have been bad since you left, he said quietly. The farm is failing. Your sister... He swallowed hard. Violet married Garrett Hayes like I wanted, but she's miserable. Turns out pretty doesn't mean happy. And His voice broke. I've been thinking about you, wondering if you survived, wondering if I made a mistake. You did make a mistake, Marin said, her voice cold. You treated me like I was worthless my whole life. You sold me to a stranger like I was livestock. And now you come here because what? You want me back? You want me to save your failing farm? I want to make it right. Her father's eyes filled with tears. I want to apologize. You want forgiveness you haven't earned. Dakota cut in. You want to ease your guilt without doing the work of change. I know men like you. My own father was like you once. Valued the wrong things. Hurt the people who loved him. You know what changed him? Losing everything. Maybe you need to lose more before you understand what you had. Her father turned to Myron desperately. Please, I know I was wrong. I know I hurt you. But you're my daughter, my blood. Come home. We can start over. I'll treat you better. I promise. For a moment, just a moment, the girl Myron had been wanted to say yes. Wanted to believe that her father had changed, that she could fix what was broken in their family. But then Dakota's hand found hers, warm and steady, and she remembered. She already had a home, one she'd built through courage and choice, not blood. I am home, she said clearly. This is my family now. These are my people. You're 20 years too late with your apologies, and I don't need them anymore. I don't need anything from you. Her father's face crumpled. Myron, please. There is something you should know before you leave, though, Myron continued, her voice stronger now. I'm happy, happier than I ever was in your house. I'm loved here, valued, respected. Everything you said I'd never have because of my face. I have it, because these people see what matters. They see me. She stepped closer to Dakota, and his arm came around her shoulders, solid and sure. So take your guilt and your late regrets and go home. Work on being better to Violet. Try to actually be the father you should have been. But don't come back here expecting me to fix what you broke. I'm done carrying your shame. Her father looked at her for a long moment, and something shifted in his face. Maybe understanding. Maybe just defeat. I'm sorry, he whispered. For whatever that's worth now, I'm sorry. It's worth something, Myron said quietly, but it's not worth enough. He nodded slowly, mounted his horse, and rode away with his men. Myron watched until they disappeared into the desert and felt something release in her chest. The last chain binding her to her old life, finally broken. Dakota pulled her close. Are you all right? I'm perfect, she said and meant it. Let's go home. They rode back to the village together, husband and wife, partners in truth, and Myron knew with absolute certainty that she'd made the right choice. Her father could keep his farm, his regrets, and his guilt. She had everything she needed right here. As they crested the rise and the village came into view, her village now, her home, Myron felt a joy so profound, it brought tears to her eyes. The ugly daughter who no man would want had been wrong. She'd been wanted all along. She'd just been looking in the wrong place. 5 years passed in the village, and they were the best years of Myron's life. She and Dakota built a life together that was rich in everything that mattered. Love, partnership, purpose, joy. They had 2 children, a daughter with Dakota's dark eyes and a son with Myron's stubborn chin. And Myron discovered that motherhood suited her in ways she'd never imagined. She raised her children to value kindness over beauty, strength over appearance, character over everything. She taught them to see people truly, the way Dakota had taught her. The village thrived, and Myron became one of its pillars. She taught the younger women farming techniques from her childhood, helped tend the sick, mediated disputes with a fairness that earned respect. She learned to speak Apache fluently, to track game, to read the desert's moods. She became, in every way that mattered, Apache. But she never forgot where she came from or what she'd survived. One evening, as she sat outside her wickiup watching her children play while Dakota worked nearby, a rider approached the village. A white woman, young and dirty and clearly exhausted, leading a broken-down horse. Myron stood as the woman stopped, swaying with fatigue. Please, the woman said. I need help. I'm lost. My husband, he left me, said I was too ugly to keep, that no one would want me anyway, so why bother? Myron's heart clenched with recognition. She saw herself in this woman's face, not the features but the defeated posture, the shame, the desperate hope warring with despair. She approached slowly. You're not ugly. You're surviving. There's a difference. The woman's eyes filled with tears. You're kind to lie, but I'm not lying. I'm telling you what took me 18 years to learn. Your worth isn't in your face. It's in your heart, your courage, your willingness to keep going when everything says quit. Marin gestured to the village. You're welcome here. We judge people by what they do, not what they look like. If you want to stay, to learn, to build a life, there's room. The woman stared at her. Why would you help me? You don't know me. Because someone helped me once when I had nothing. Because kindness is meant to be passed forward. Because you deserve better than what you've been given. Marin held out her hand. My name is Marin. I was traded to this village by my father because he thought I was too ugly to be worth keeping. Best thing that ever happened to me. The woman took her hand, something like hope flickering in her eyes. I'm Sarah. Welcome home, Sarah, Marin said. And as she led this broken woman into the village, introducing her to Neil and the other women who'd teach her to survive and thrive, Marin felt the circle complete. She'd been Sarah once, lost, ashamed, convinced of her own worthlessness. But love and partnership and community had shown her the truth. Beauty fades, but character endures. Shallow judgments wound, but deep seeing heals. And sometimes the things we think will destroy us actually save us, if we're brave enough to let them. That night, after Sarah was settled and the children were asleep, Marin sat with Dakota outside their wickiup, watching stars wheel overhead in patterns that had become as familiar as breathing. Do you ever regret it? She asked quietly. Trading for me? Taking a chance on someone your people didn't know? Dakota pulled her close, his arm around her shoulders, his presence as steady as the mountains. Never. Not once. You gave me back my life, Marin. Showed me what real partnership looks like. Gave me children I adore. Built a home that's full of love. He pressed a kiss to her temple. Your father thought he was getting rid of a burden. Instead, he gave me the greatest gift. His loss. My blessing. Marin thought about her father sometimes. Wondered if he was still alive. If he'd ever truly understood what he'd lost. She thought about Violet, married to her rich man, hopefully finding some kind of happiness. But mostly, she didn't think about them at all. Because they were her past, and she'd built a future so much better than anything they could have given her. I'm glad I was ugly, she said suddenly. Dakota pulled back to look at her, confused. What? If I'd been pretty like Violet, my father would have kept me, married me off to someone local. I'd have lived and died in that homestead, never knowing this. She gestured at the village, the life they'd built, never knowing you, never knowing myself. So I'm glad. Glad I was ugly enough to be traded away. Glad I landed here. Glad I got to become this person instead of the one I would have been. Dakota cupped her face, his thumbs gentle on skin that was weathered now from desert sun and wind and the passage of time. You're not ugly. You never were. You just needed people with eyes that could actually see. You saw me, Marin whispered. From the beginning, you saw me. I did. And I'll keep seeing you. Every day. Every way. For the rest of our lives. They sat together under the stars. Two people who'd found each other in the most unlikely way, and Marin felt gratitude so deep it was almost overwhelming. Her father had meant to hurt her when he traded her away, had meant to solve a problem, get rid of a burden. Instead, he'd set her free. Free to find real love, real home, real worth. And in the end, that was the greatest irony. The man who'd tried to destroy her had actually saved her. Not on purpose, not with kindness, but through his very cruelty, he'd pushed her toward the life she was always meant to have. Marin smiled into the darkness. Somewhere, in some far-off homestead, her father might be regretting his choice. But here, in an Apache village under a desert sky, his discarded daughter was happy. Truly, deeply, completely happy. And that was the best revenge she could have ever imagined. Living so well that his judgment no longer mattered. Being so loved that his rejection became meaningless. Building a life so full that his cruelty was just a distant memory, powerless to hurt her anymore. Years later, when Maren was old and grey and surrounded by grandchildren who thought she was the wisest woman alive, someone asked her what she'd learned from her life. She thought about it carefully, then said, "I learned that the people who reject you are often doing you a favor. That the things you think will break you might actually make you. That love is about seeing and being seen, not about faces or bodies or things that fade. And I learned that sometimes the best gift someone can give you is not wanting you, because it forces you to want yourself, to build yourself, to become yourself." She looked around at her large, loving family, children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who valued kindness over appearance, character over beauty, truth over everything. "My father gave me to an Apache because I was ugly," she said. "But that Apache loved me like no other man could have, because he saw past my face to my heart, and that made all the difference." The children didn't fully understand, but they would. Someday, when life taught them that worth comes from within, when they learned to value what matters and discard what doesn't, they'd remember. They'd remember the grandmother who'd been traded away and found paradise, the ugly girl who became beloved, the discarded daughter who built a legacy of love, and they'd know what she'd known, that every ending is a beginning if you're brave enough to let it be. Maren's old life ended the day her father sold her, but her real life, her true life, began that same day. And what a beautiful life it had been. What a beautiful life it still was. And as the sun set over the desert in colors that hurt with their beauty, Maren closed her eyes and smiled. She was home. She was loved. She was exactly where she was meant to be. And that, in the end, was all that mattered. Thank you for reading Maren's story. If it touched your heart, please leave a comment below sharing what resonated with you most. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories about courage, redemption, and finding your true worth even when the world can't see it. Remember, you are not what people say you are. You are what you know yourself to be in your heart. And that's where your real value lives, where no one else's judgment can ever touch it.